2023. Thanks everybody for joining us. We have myself, Dr. Bullock, and then Claire is my co-chair. We are going to defer approval of the minutes just for right now. They were sent out on January 31st. So Morgan, if you just let me know whenever we have quorum, we can go back to this part of the agenda. And I'll just go ahead and hand it over to you for work group updates.
Thank you, Dr. Bullock. So I'll just do some brief work group updates. The U=U task force met last week, Wednesday, and we just talked about the ambassador campaign that continues to go well. Ambassadors sharing their social media posts, and we'll start doing some video interviews with them soon, and hopefully some wider spread marketing with them soon. So that's going well. Brady, do you want to add anything to that? No? Okay, cool.
Just to say, I'm so proud of these three individuals, and I'll say their name, like Evelyn and Scott and Sean, being so vulnerable and so public about their status and working so hard to disseminate the U=U message and science. They are a great attribute to our city, and I'm grateful for them.
They're doing a really great job, and in the follow-up email for this meeting, I'll share with you all posts that they've been making. The prevention work group met also last Wednesday, and we've shared how getting that group going or continuing that group has been a bit of a struggle, but we had a good turnout at the meeting on Wednesday, and it's looking encouraging for this year. So during our next meeting, like work group is going to be focusing on or bringing their ideas for which prevention priorities on for the upcoming year. I'm going to just share some updates for the equity work group and the trauma-informed work group from Jamie Reagan. And so the equity work group, they met in mid-January. They had a few new members, and they also discussed National Black HIV Awareness Day. Mahari is having an event on February 7th, and I will share that flyer with you all, encouraging attendance to that event. They are also working on some equity and SDOH metrics, and they also held a special meeting near the end of January to discuss the implementation of the equity lens. For the cultural humility and trauma-informed care group, they met in late January and are recruiting new members since they lost a member, and they're hoping for some representation from TDH. And they're utilizing the group as a space to operationalize the most prioritized goal that came out of the trauma-informed care retreat, which was the creation of a trauma-informed care coordinating center in Nashville. And Dr. Brown talked a bit about that in our last Advisory Council meeting. And Dr. Brown also mentioned getting funding to do study recruitment and survey collection for the study that's going to measure patient perspectives of organizational trauma resilience. And so far, they've done over 100 surveys at pilot ASO, and they're going to be recruiting the second site on February 1st. So I guess they've done that already, and additional sites are in the planning phases. And the results from the study, the P50 study, can help to inform metrics for future EHE work group and the trauma-informed care and cultural work group goals. Also, I do want to mention that, we talked about launching new work groups that came out of the EHE Summit last September. And I did send out doodle polls to you all and also folks who attended the EHE Summit in September. And unfortunately, I didn't really get a response to those. So we haven't been able to schedule any meetings for those new work groups. So just to put that back on just to remind you all of that we do need council members to join these work groups and also be recruiting for the work groups. And just a reminder, we're trying to launch a data work group, an SDOH work group, a fast track cities work group, and an HIV testing work group, I think. Okay, so I will pass it over to Claire for some new business.
Thanks, Morgan. We're going to be continuing a conversation that's sort of been ongoing at our council meetings in the past few months about HIV modernization and criminalization. So today we have Dr. Robin Lennon Deering and Dwayne Morrell from the Tennessee HIV Modernization Coalition with us to share a presentation about THMC and possible ways that the council can become involved in their current work. So thank you both for being here today. I'll let you take it away.
Thank you for having us. We're very excited to be here. Is there any way I could share my screen?
Yeah, I just made you the presenter, so you should be able
Okay.
to now.
Well, maybe let's see. Before I share my screen, maybe we should do introductions. Dwayne, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself first?
Sure. For those people that know me, you definitely know me from possibly the Tennessee HIV Modernization Coalition and my work with several nonprofits here in the Memphis area. If not, nice to meet you all. I am Dwayne Morrell. I have over 20 years experience in HIV care and prevention work, and also advocacy included. My work has granted me to travel to Los Angeles and do this work, even being in Nashville for a very brief time and coming back to Memphis. And I'm born and raised Memphis, so it brought me home. But I wanted to just say hello and thank you guys for having us here. And hopefully, by the end of this presentation, we do have you guys having a little bit more understanding about HIV decriminalization in Tennessee, and actually, hopefully you hear the call of action and want to jump in and do something about it. I think those are my two goals at the end of this presentation. So thank you for having us again.
Okay. So who are we and what do we do? Dwayne and I, as you'd mentioned, we both worked as advocates and allies in the HIV community. And Dwayne and I met in 2016 in Memphis. We both knew people that were in the community who had been criminalized by these criminal laws for HIV, and they were put on the sex offender registry. They asked us for help to get off the sex offender registry. Well, anyone that looks into getting a person off the sex offender registry, they're going to realize how unjust these laws are, because we were unable, and we were unable to help the people that really needed it. So fast forward to 2019, and we were still trying to get people off the sex offender registry. But Dwayne and I gathered with several other advocates and people living with HIV who also wanted to change the HIV laws. And we have been meeting ever since. We did grow to a state coalition, and we got support from the Center for HIV Law and Policy and Zero Project, both national organizations. But we're still a group of grassroots people that our goal is to modernize Tennessee's outdated, unfair HIV criminal laws. And we want to modernize the statute of criminal exposure, and we want to repeal the aggravated prostitution statute. We're also asking, this is a big ask, but we're also asking for a statute that will retroactively expunge sex offender status for all people arrested for criminal exposure to HIV and aggravated prostitution, unless they have a crime that involved force, violence, or children. So that would be someone that would already be on the sex offender registry, not just because they have HIV. So in June of 2022, the Williams Institute released a report on HIV criminalization enforcement in Tennessee. They used data from the sex offender registry and also from case files of the Shelby County DA's office. And the findings that were documented are very concerning. By race, you'll see that African Americans make up 17% of the population in Tennessee, and they make up 56% of people living with HIV. But of all those that are convicted of HIV crimes, 76%, 75% are African Americans. And if you look at the circle here on the bottom right of the screen, if you break it down by race and gender, women make up 46% of those convicted. Even though women are only 26% of people living with HIV in Tennessee. So we know from just looking at these statistics that the people who are convicted of these crimes are overwhelmingly Black and women. Unfortunately, we were unable to get the statistics on how the laws have affected transgender people because they don't, criminal justice and the sex offender registry does not include a category for people of transgender experience or gender nonconforming. It's only, male or female. So, but we do know that the transgender community has been highly impacted by the HIV laws. So, like I said, Tennessee requires that everyone convicted of aggravated prostitution and criminal exposure to HIV that involves intimate contact register with the state sex offender registry. And actually, the sex offender registry was really the only comprehensive source of statewide data because all of the districts and communities that place people under arrest, they don't keep the records based on those crimes. And so really the only way we could get uniform data was the sex offender registry. And if you take a look at this table, let's see, there was 154 people. This was 2022. 154 people were on the sex offender registry for either aggravated prostitution or criminal exposure to HIV. So you see that 95 were arrested for aggravated prostitution and 139 for criminal exposure. Okay, and then I broke it down too in how, with race, what percent were Black, what percent were white. And there was no people of Hispanic origin that were listed as sex offenders for HIV crimes. In addition to the disparities in race and gender, the criminal laws are disproportionately applied to people experiencing homelessness, people that are the poorest citizens of the state. We found that 19% of people convicted of an HIV crime were experiencing homelessness. That's 1 in 5. So to show you the difference between the 19% and the state percent of homelessness, Tennessee has a homelessness rate of 0.11%. So these socioeconomic indicators have let us know that people that are being arrested don't have their basic needs met. Another statistic was that only 21% of people on the sex offender registry for an HIV crime, only 21% had a vehicle. Because they have to register their vehicles and a lot of other things that they have to do. But in Tennessee, almost 98% of Tennesseans have access to at least one car. So you can see that they don't have some of the basic necessities that we as citizens need: shelter and transportation. So the Williams Institute study was also presented in a webinar that was done, I think, in August. It was called Tennessee Blues: Exploring HIV Criminalization in Tennessee, and it was co-hosted by the Health Not Prisons Collective, and we had panelists that were including Dwayne and I, the Williams Institute, and also we had people that were advocates and who had been directly impacted by the sex offender registry on the panel. They spoke about their lived experience. There's a link on here to the webinar if they recorded it, if you want to take a look at it. Okay, so the coalition, we're not housed in any particular agency or organization. As I mentioned, we're a grassroots group, we're volunteers. Any activities that have happened have been funded by Dwayne and I, or they're part of our employer public service to the community. But the situation is that neither Dwayne or I are a person with lived experience of having HIV. And since the coalition values the meaningful involvement of people with HIV to modernize the criminal laws, it's important that we have them involved in the coalition's work, but not just involved as members. We want them to be involved in leadership, advisory, and decision-making roles. Now, many of the people with HIV in Tennessee are members of intersecting multiple marginalized groups and may not have financial resources, like, maybe they're economically or educationally marginalized. They might be in a survival mode from day to day. And so we need their voice. We need their leadership and to know what it is that they support, the voice of the communities that's most impacted. So the disconnect that we had with our coalition, we believe in this meaningful involvement of people living with HIV, but we didn't have the resources financially to really use those resources to help encourage people living with HIV to take leadership roles in the coalition. So we actually applied for a grant with Zero Project, the AMP grant, and we got it. So we just started with this stipend position. It's going to help us to build the capacity of people living with HIV across Tennessee to build the work of the HIV Modernization Coalition. We have, the great thing about it is we had a lot of people that when we sent out the announcement that we were gonna looking for positions for co-chairs, we had a very excellent response. We interviewed over 10 people and we found 2, and you will find that those 2 out soon. We're gonna make an announcement soon. Okay, there's 2 other things that I want to tell you about, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dwayne. One of them is, you may have already heard about this, but the Center for HIV Law and Policy has lodged a complaint with the Department of Justice saying that Tennessee and Ohio have discriminated against people living with HIV because that have been arrested or at risk of being arrested, and that it's discrimination because they are people living with a disability. So we have a person, Stephanie Berger from the Department of Justice, who has been coming, with trying to interview people to find out what their experience has been with discrimination. So that's one area. And then the other area, we have the National ACLU. They are wanting to speak to people in Tennessee that are impacted by the laws and the sex offender registration, because they are trying to file a lawsuit to strike down the laws and get people removed from the sex offender registry, perhaps by doing a civil rights lawsuit. But if that's not going to happen, they'll help people individually. So they're coming actually to Memphis next week to interview people, and they're trying to find out what litigation strategy would be best to help people get off the sex offender registry while we're waiting for our next area of our work, which is with the legislative process. So I'll turn it over to Dwayne, and you can talk about what we're doing in that area.
Thank you, Robin. So as far as our legislative process and where we currently are, I want to take you back first to when we first started introducing bills. So that's as far back as 2021, where we introduced House Bill 1599, and that was with John Ray Clemens. You guys, he's probably on the tip of everybody's tongue right now. He's partnered with Jeff Yarbrough with, I think it's like around the HIV funds being cut. So that's pretty interesting that he's now involved in that. And he introduced the bill for us in 2021. Following 2021, last year in 2022, we were able to partner with Gloria Johnson out the Knoxville area, and we introduced Bill 2792, which was called the HIV Modernization Act. And so everything that we explained, or Robin explained earlier, and what we wanted with HIV laws in Tennessee and changing them, the changes we wanted to make, the language that we wanted to change. It was very comprehensive in approach. So I wouldn't try to explain it now, but you can go back and look at those bills. They still are available on the Capitol website if you're interested in kind of reading and doing a little bit of leisure reading. So it's House Bill 1599, and the second bill is House Bill 2792 with Gloria Johnson. So this year, we're currently working with Representative Dwayne Thompson. He's from the Cordova area here in the Memphis area. And so right now, we don't have a bill that's actually filed with a number. What we're doing now is filing a caption bill, and then we're going to go ahead and continue to work forward in the work that we're doing and what we're asking for, and trying to be very innovative in what we're trying to do with this language, also with how the law works and what we try to do. Because even back, if you guys maybe remember, if you were in the industry then in 2014, 15, Deborah Moody passed a bill where it was very helpful on paper for people with aggravated prostitution charges. And so they were supposed to be able to go to the courts and petition to get off the to get off the sex offender registry with those kind of charges. So what ended up happening is that bill that law got ignored by a lot of your people in the legal, I guess, courtroom and attorneys. Like, people just didn't know about it. And so it was really hard to find a process to help people who had those charges and actually get off, using that particular law. It was just difficult. So what we wanted to do is look at something like that and look at other pieces of legislation that was in history where we tried to actually change HIV laws and look at it from a very unique and innovative direction, and maybe try to do something different where everyone can agree on in the state of Tennessee and it can actually get passed. So that's the idea in the direction with the caption bill right now. And working with Dwayne Thompson, also, we have people like Sarah Kyle and other folks in the Minority Caucus who are interested in this work. who are actually supporting us along the way. So those are the legislative actions that the coalition has been a part of. But some accomplishments that we have had has been the new bill modernizing the state of law. I mean the state, and that's the work that we're currently doing. Also, our virtual monthly meetings. We have really been doing those, and it's been growing in popularity. Like we have a lot of different people who are new employees, old employees in different agencies across the state and even outside of the state who want to come and just get down and dirty and throw down and work. And that's such a heart-filling thing to witness. Just folks who are really dedicated to doing the work. And that's why, like any chance I get, I'm sorry, Brady. I'm sorry, I'm embarrassing you, but Brady is one of those people who I always celebrate when he comes, because he loves to just do the work. Also, Robin, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of toss it over to you about the town hall meetings and also talking about our new co-chairs. Is that okay?
Yeah. So, yeah, in addition to webinars, we've also done some in-person and virtual town hall meetings. And these have had panelists such as Brady and other people with lived experience, and Amber's helped us too. Just to get the word out about what's going on, what's the law, and how the law is impacting people. Because really, that's what brought Dwayne and I to the work, is that we had people that were sitting in front of us that could not get off the sex offender registry. They've already paid their dues to society, and that they have been in the community trying to get jobs, trying to pay taxes, and it's ridiculous. It's so unfair. I'm gonna stop sharing. So I just want to open it up to questions. We've given you a little overview of what we do, and now we're Brady, do you want to add anything to what we've said?
Yeah, y'all pretty much got it. I'm just impressed and so thankful for all the work that y'all are doing. So thank you for not letting this get past y'all and keeping this moving forward, because without the two of you, we wouldn't be where we are today. So blessings and thanks.
It's a long-term goal and work. So, but we're not going anywhere. And the people that are those 154 people, of those 154 people that are on the sex offender registry, now 26 have been actually convicted of another crime that would put them on the sex offender registry, like the child abuse or rape. So it's actually 154 minus 26, because we're not asking for the law to be changed that, well, they committed a crime and they're on the sex offender registry, but then they, on top of that, gave them the additional felony charge of criminal exposure. But we're saying, if you've just, there's so many stories of people who have been accused of being, of trying to pass the virus. They've, broken up with a relationship, and what happens is that someone puts a complaint in, and as soon as they find out, okay, well, so-and-so's HIV positive, they arrest them. And that person, the tragedy is that they don't tell people that when they plead guilty, that they're going to go on the sex offender registry for life.
Yeah.
It's not disclosed. And did you all know that? Okay, well, most people don't know that. And so people are not told that if you plead guilty, it's done and over with. You cannot ever say, no, wait a minute, I just pled guilty so I could get out of jail or whatever. It's done. They're on the sex offender registry for life. And that's a scarlet letter that is, I mean, they're on the public database. It's horrible. It's horrible and it's not fair.
And Robin, if I could add, I've always like shared this story, even when during the HIV tester certifications, I tell the story of this educator. This guy has a master's degree in what he do, has been doing it for years, and he's a dean of students here in the city, in a high school. And he was in the same gender loving relationship, had disclosed to the partner, been with the partner for years. When their partner got ready to leave, they bribed him. And they bribed him for over a year, where he had to pay them to not report, because they knew that one, there was no statute of limitation to making that kind of report. Two, they knew that all they had to do was get the ball rolling. They didn't have to go to any court dates. They didn't have to participate in anything, but just it really was a rule like a domestic violence case. All I got to do is file and make the complaint. The state is going to make it roll. And that's exactly what happened with him. So for 3 years, he was in litigation until he just got tired and he just played out.
Did he plead guilty?
He took a plea bargain. Let me be exact. He took a plea bargain where he is meeting with a probation officer and going through that. But what he was really afraid of, they have random background checks at the institution where he works, and he was afraid that they would find that charge and then give him probably termination letters and whatever else.
I see some.
If I may, yeah, thank you,
Amen.
Robin. If I may, I was just going to add a little bit into as much of and it is such a tragedy that we have this going on in the state of Tennessee, and involving the sex offender registry and all of that. But for someone living with HIV, like myself, who's not ever had to be, come face to face with criminalization, just the very existence of these laws, I really want to drive this home as well. The very existence of these laws in the state of Tennessee puts everyone living with HIV at risk, because these laws create a power dynamic. Y'all kind of hinted at it before about the gentleman being blackmailed. The same for me. I was raped for 3 months by someone in law enforcement who was more connected and understood the laws better than I did after my diagnosis. And they threatened me with criminalization if I did not have sex with them. And I know that there are other people in heterosexual relationships, women being held in, battered relationships because these laws exist. If they try to leave, then they're threatened to be put on the sex offender registry. So these laws have a lot of implications on the lives of those of us living with HIV. And it is why this is so important to me and should be important to everyone here on this call. So thank y'all again.
Thank you for sharing, Brady.
Thank you, Brady. Amy or Ama?
Hi, yeah, my name is Ima. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I agree with the points that Brady was raising, and I've heard a couple of presentations that have really linked with, done analyses across the country and looking at criminalization laws and impacts on care outcomes. But from a provider perspective as well, it definitely impacts people's willingness to disclose in relationships, and of course creates a number of barriers that way. So I think the ripple effect really is tremendous, as you guys are describing, and I think such an important issue. Another thing that has come up, and this was told to me by someone in the health department, which is really unfortunate, is that I think that these laws are also being used in the wrong way by employees of the state to encourage people who are out of care to come back into care. And so I think it's really really emphasizing this idea of further stigmatizing, further really creating fear about criminalization that's coming from a number of different directions. So I think this work is really critical.
Yeah, it's true that people they can complain and make a complaint, but they don't have to be tested. They don't have to have HIV. Like if they say I was exposed, they don't have to be tested.
Yeah.
Say I was exposed. They don't have it. It's like, it's so ridiculous. And of course, one of the things, if you read the report or heard anything about the report, is that almost 100% of people that are arrested for aggravated prostitution are arrested by undercover police in sting operations. Yeah, so they're not passing the virus at all either.
But the thing is, also in those things, they already have a rapport with those officers. Is that right, Robin?
Yeah, some of them, if they, you know, prostitution is a misdemeanor. But that's why it's so horrible that just because you have an HIV diagnosis, they bump it up to a felony,
Mhm.
which is ridiculous. So if they know, like if a person, and people that are on the street, you think about that, it's, the 1 in 5 homeless persons, or people that have, been kicked out of their homes because, of their gender identity, or say it's someone that's addicted to drugs. They are making poor decisions, and they may be already being looked at by the police, being known by the police, but it's, they don't get help. They're not given help as far as to get themselves back on their, they feel like criminalizing them and putting them away, jailing them, throwing away the key. That's going to be that's the way to solve the problem, but that's not.
So I've kind of two questions. One, obviously you're facing an uphill battle in the legislature with these bills. And so I'm curious, are these bills looking pretty much the same each time they're introduced? Are you all making changes to them in the interim? And the other question is just, what can people who are on this call be doing to get involved? And I'm thinking we do have some clinical folks on this call. What is the role of people with a science background in sort of advocating for these laws?
Well, I'll just say about the clinical folks, and then Dwayne, you can take it about the bill.
Sure.
You're a provider or a person that has interaction with anyone that lives with HIV, tell them about our group. Tell them that, there's a group in Tennessee called the HIV Modernization Coalition. You can join their listserv. You can go to their website. We are trying to get the word out. We want people to know about us. And, we might not be able to get them off the sex offender registry right away, but we're working on it. And we also have people that are in our membership that will help them emotionally by calling them, just peer support. So share with people that are living with HIV about our group.
And I think when it comes to the bill language and what's introduced every year, it does change from year to year, because what we do, we kind of have a bullpen of people living with HIV, as well as people who are professionals in the field, to come together and put together the bill language and saying what exactly we want. Usually, I will say, out of all the bills that have been introduced, usually we kind of like go to the line, and in our hearts, we want everything we want. But we understand that when it comes to trying to find a champion in a legislative, seat, that there are some concessions that we're going to have to make, and we're going to have to give up some things. So we already have our list of things that we can do without, if we have to do without them. But there are like hard stops also in the bill language where we're like, we can't compromise that. Like the aggravated prostitution charge, and that being taken off that particular law, we want that. Like, that's not compromising. Talking about intentional transmission and changing the language around what transmission looks like. Right now it doesn't address that. We always try to put that language in there to say that, okay, if a person is going to be charged with this, there needs to be some some evidence of intentional transmission or successful transmission that has occurred. So you need to have a positive result to say that, okay, this person, transmitted the virus to me. Because what we do know medically is very hard to transmit the virus. I mean, Brady, pick on you again. U equals U. Everyone knows that U equals U. And many people who are living with HIV in the state of Tennessee are medically adherent and under a doctor's care. And to discount that is inhumane. And so the thing is, we want the law to be fair. We want the language to be accurate. We want the intention to match the impact. Because what we do know, like the law that was drafted, this was like from the 80s. Then this is what we're fighting. That the intention for it was that, oh, we're just going to put a law on the books and we want to keep the public safe. It's a public safety situation. Now, what you've done with this particular law is not in the vein of public safety anymore. Now it's harmful to those people who are living with the HIV diagnosis, those people who are in those priority populations that we're currently trying to keep in care. So high risk negatives, even talk about the stigma around testing. Like a person don't want to get tested because I don't want to have to carry the burden of knowing that I have a diagnosis and now I have to go and get care and have to tell everyone that I'm going to be sexually active with in order to save my hide that I'm positive. No one wants to deal with that. That's a hard thing to have to get comfortable with. And so that's why I always celebrate anyone who's living with HIV because they have had to find a new way to be active in this world that's constantly kicking them in the mouth.
Lauren, I see Lauren's hand up.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Lauren, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Sorry, thank you. I was just going to ask if there's any opportunity for us as constituents to also lobby and to go in and talk to our legislators.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We have some fact sheets on our website and, we're going to be, consistently updating them. And I think just opening the door for, letting people know that, people that are living with HIV are being discriminated against because of these laws. And just in case y'all don't know, there's only 6 states that put people on the sex offender registry, and we're the worst. Tennessee is one of the 6.
So do you think that we could kind of have an organized day on the Hill or something like that? Would that be helpful or?
Yeah, and I'm currently planning something now. On February 28th is HIV is Not a Crime Day. And that is in collaboration with the Elizabeth Taylor AIDS Foundation and also Zero Project. So what we're planning on trying to do is to either do something virtual or still do something in person on the Hill where we can have basically like what we do with our town hall, have it there and invite elected officials to come and actually be a part of the audience. And I wanted to double back, and I see Ms. Beverly, your hand is up. I wanted to double back on the question you were asking about medical professionals and what they could do. I think education from a medical professional is very much so key in this conversation because you're the authority. You're the authority for a person in an elected seat where they don't have to challenge like, okay, like myself, Robin, anyone else that go and talk to an elected official, they're like, okay, well, they're very passionate about this. But from a medical perspective or a medical professional's perspective, it's like, no, they got the data that supports what their idea is. And that's what we need. We need that strength on our side.
Beverly, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Just, I think I heard you all go over it a little bit, but just wanted to make sure. What what has been done, or if there's been any progress with regards to the HIV criminalization of women? I do remember some years ago, uh, I was involved with with a group of women, and there was a concern that, if I'm not mistaken, the legislation as it related to HIV criminalization of women was tougher for women as opposed to men.
Well, primarily women are arrested for aggravated prostitution.
Right.
You know, they're in that situation of survival. And you know what? There has been a study, there was a study in 2013, but you know, it's the penalties can be up to 15 years. It's like 3 to 15 years is the penalty for a felony of this type. And many people have gone to jail or gone to prison for years. And so, yeah, 46% of the people that are arrested of that 154 are women. And we don't know how many are transgender women. So it's highly impactful for women of color, for all women. And, you know, think about it. When they come out and they put them on the sex offender registry, women are mothers, women are grandmothers.
Yes,
Follow
I
the
just
same-
asked. I
Yeah.
just asked the question because I worked with a young lady some years ago, who had been charged, and as a matter of fact, she had been a victim of sex trafficking herself, but once placed on the register, she was a mother and could not even take her child to the park, and yeah, uh, have a birthday party and invite her child's friends. And it was, yeah. So I just wanted to know if any progress. And it was probably around 2013, between 2013 and 2015. A group of us was kind of doing some work to support women around this issue.
Yeah, and I think that the bill or the law that Deborah Moody had introduced and got passed, she was trying to address that kind of thing because I think this is right before the Centoria Brown situation in Tennessee. But I think like right now, as far as the HIV laws and like what the penalties hold, it is still hard for mothers to be mothers with kids. Um, and yeah, like if they kid go to daycare, go to a school, if they want to go to a a place of faith, like these are very difficult places to try to navigate and be there and also have your kids. And that's the other reason why we wanted to definitely, that's one of the other things that we did actually pay attention to when we were talking about introducing the bill language and understanding that people are dealing with that disparity and hardship.
And I do see Amber's hand up. I think we might just have time for one more question or comment, because we do have another important issue we've got to discuss today, and I want to make sure we've got some time for that as well. So Amber, what did you want to share?
I put this in the comment box, but I just wanted to point out that our laws also specifically address hepatitis B and hepatitis C too. So this also impacts people living with viral hepatitis. And, you know, I think bringing those folks into the fold, particularly people that work in the recovery kind of realm of things and substance use, could make a stronger coalition and could appeal to a larger base and might help push things forward if we highlight that viral hepatitis is also nestled in these laws too. So that's just something to keep in mind. I don't think folks get on the sex offender registry for viral hepatitis, but they can still serve time and get charges on their record.
I agree.
Yeah, thanks everyone for your contributions, and thank you so much, Dwayne. And I see that Robin had to hop off, but please give her our thanks as well. And I definitely don't think that we should drop this subject, and I hope it will continue to be included on our agenda for advisory council meetings in the future. So we'll keep talking about it, and let us know of any advocacy opportunities, days on the Hill, things like that. I think there are lots of people here who'd love to be involved in something like that. All right. Thank you. All right, so with that, we are going to move on to our next topic of discussion. This is really the last thing on our agenda for today, and it's a big one. So by now, you've probably all heard about the news about the state funding cuts to community organizations in Tennessee for HIV prevention and surveillance work. And we just want to open the meeting up for discussion about the potential effects of the cuts and how this council can and should respond. And I know that Brandon, you have been kind of trying to figure out a little bit about how much this is going to impact organizations across Nashville. If you have any updates on that, I'd love to hear them as well.
I don't currently have any updates from when you and I last spoke. I think the one thing that our office wanted to know is just the number of how many organizations in the county may possibly be affected by the I guess the financial component. And we were just curious to know if anyone has put together an impact analysis, if you will. We can be aware. I've reached out to United Way because they were one of the organizations who I was told to connect with first, because it's my understanding that they receive the federal grants, and then those are then distributed to subcontractors. So I've learned a little bit since the announcement about 2 weeks ago, but really since the announcement came out, I haven't heard anything other than groups are really just very apprehensive or worried, really, to put it that way. And I'm just hoping to still see if I can just learn as much as possible.
Dr. Honka, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I don't, excuse me, I don't have the answer to that, but I know that the CFAR had put together a red cap document specifically to try and track that. And so I can get that summary information and share with you, but I also just put the link in the chat so that anyone can share widely to any community-based organizations that you think might be affected, so that we can add to the list. But I know several folks have filled it out already, not just from Davidson County, but I can follow up and try and get some summary, but also would encourage people to share it so we can actually document.
Thank you, and I'll leave my email address in the chat too, because I've really just been making phone calls to individual organizations that I've been told to just check up on, if you will. So I'm reading all the messages, but yeah, I'll just do that. Thank you.
I'm seeing here in the chat Mark's comment about 340B funds and organizations potentially losing their 340B designation as a result of this. That's definitely a concern I've heard. It definitely, I think, is a concern for some groups here in Nashville, and one that I don't think a lot of people sort of realized at first, and it's sort of that realization is kind of dawning now.
A question, Claire, how will they lose their 340B designation? It was my understanding. Guess I more recently I realized that so that money does not come from the state. I thought it came directly from the pharmaceutical company.
I am not the
agencies who
best person
receive-
to explain this. I'm hoping
Mhm.
someone else will jump in here and save me.
I think I have an
Deborah?
imperfect explanation. The way it's been explained to me is that they will no longer have CDC funding, even though the way it's been disseminated via the state. Now they won't have CDC funding, and that makes them no longer eligible.
Thank you.
Mark, did you have a question? You're muted.
Okay, I would just, and I'm not an expert either, but a couple of things. My understanding, this would apply to agencies whose designation depends on receiving those federal funds for prevention, and that wouldn't be everyone. But for those, my understanding, and I think we're concerned about other regions and how it might affect us. It seems like that's often agencies that don't receive Ryan White Part B funding or any Ryan White funding, but do deliver some forms of services to people who receive care or prescribe drugs, so that they're using 340B in that way. I know it's particularly impactful in Memphis, but it may be impactful to another organization that has offices across the state. And for those two, it's a significant portion of their income. So they're going to have to scramble to see if they can work around that, as I understood it. And I apologize for lurking on your call. I'm trying to get my finger in a little bit while this is raging, just to be a conduit of communication between all the different organizations. And I've been sending out some summaries of media coverage and so forth. So thanks for letting me sit in.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And Amber, I see what you put in the chat about if your organization is at risk of losing 340B to that there may be some other ways of maintaining it. And do you want to expand on that at all?
Yeah, so Mark kind of alluded to this, but there's a couple ways that you can get 340B status. One is through Ryan White. Another mechanism is getting HIV prevention funds from the CDC, which is what would be impacted by this potential change. Another avenue is by receiving federal STI funds. So I think the state is exploring options for those that would be their only mechanism to 340B right now is the CDC HIV prevention funds, exploring mechanisms to shift them to one of those other avenues so that they can maintain 340B status. But the state doesn't always know who that is because we're not, so if all that to say, if your agency is going to lose 340B status because of this potential change, because you don't have access to one of those other streams to maintain 340B, I would suggest reaching out to your closest contact at TD8 so that that is on their radar and they can start finding a workaround.
Got it. Thank you. Unfortunately, I think that Nashville Cares and Streetworks are not represented on the call today, and I think that both of them are. I don't know if their 340B is affected, but I think that both of them are affected by the cuts. And
Nashville Cares won't be affected because they have direct CDC funds.
oh, okay. Wow. Oh, it won't be affected. Their 340B won't be affected.
Correct, but they will financially.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And this is an open discussion, so folks, feel free to share any other concerns you have or issues that you feel should be raised, but also I'm really curious to hear what folks think about what the advisory council's response should be, if we should have a coordinated response or if it makes more impact for us to respond, as our individual organizations. I'm very interested to hear what you all think about that.
I sorry I didn't raise my hand, but I suggest maybe doing a coordinated response with just the list of our organizations representation from the council as a possibility.
Dr. Shawkai, do you want to?
Yes, good afternoon. I agree with Brandon that we should do a coordinated response or strength in numbers. Beverly and I met with leadership yesterday, and they're looking to the EHE Council to help lead that. And so we're available to help with that.
Dr. Honka, did you have your hand up? I thought I saw it.
Yeah, I did. I would agree with that. I think we did have one that involved some folks from the CFAR, or an op-ed, but I am curious about, and maybe Brendan can tell us kind of what, what constraints there may be about the message, given that this group is tasked by the mayor's office. I'm curious about what, from your perspective, how we can focus. We had a lot of conversation about this, with Vanderbilt, of course, because Vanderbilt's media obligations are thereof, but we ended up coming together through the CFAR, but with personal titles. I feel this one seems a little bit trickier, but it seems like a really important group to have a response.
I can ask about the constraints part. Usually when we craft, because I've got a few other statements similar to LGBT bill topics, I normally just contact or have a lot of conversations with legal, of course. So I can ask about the constraints, and then also, even if a letter was to be crafted, I'm not sure who to give it to. And I don't know if that would be the health department, or I guess that's my other question, and I didn't know if anyone else maybe had a possible answer for that.
When we met with our legal liaison yesterday, the suggestion was giving the crafting something so that the lobbyists will have some talking points or something in advocating, excuse me, for the funding. So I'm sure we could, through the mayor's office and also through our legal liaison at health, get it to the powers that be.
Sorry, I don't know if can you all hear me? I've heard lobbyists and then CDC. I don't know, my computer cut out, but I will, Dr. Shawkai, I'll follow up on my end.
Okay, and I'll get more information because this is Tom Sharp that we met with yesterday. So,
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. I could talk with him.
Okay.
Thank you.
I do think, Lauren or Dr. Honkai, whoever would know, do you think we would be able to use whatever data comes from the CFAR survey that went out? Because I do think, as the Nashville EHE Council, it's important for us to show a really direct impact on agencies operating out of Davidson County. And so if we're able, the more data we have about how much of a financial impact this is going to have on organizations here, I think the stronger our stance will be. So do you know how we're allowed to use that information?
I think the discussion when we, decided we should try and collect this information was for just this type of purpose. So I'm just emailing David Haas now to let him know that we need it. So I can I'll loop you onto that email chain, Claire, so we can.
Yeah, he emailed me and Peter in April yesterday and said that I believe that we have 24 respondents, and he basically asked us to, like, I guess, read it, synthesize it. So I think, which I was kind of like, oh, I didn't know that we were doing that. But so I think that we'll probably get a summary together between the three of us, and assuming that you all don't want to read all of it, just I know that he wanted to keep things confidential. So I would assume we would need to kind of synthesize it.
I would just encourage, people to share it, because I know that several of the respondents are Memphis based
Yeah.
right now. So I want to make sure we can,
Well, we also wanted to look at it. I particularly wanted to make sure, and this is not relevant to Nashville necessarily, but I wanted to make sure that places like Chattanooga, ETSU, that those areas were represented, and, if not, make sure that we reach out to people so that they know it exists and that they have the opportunity to complete it.
So a question, with this letter that we're currently discussing, will it would it reflect only the concerns about the cuts to prevention, or the overall concerns of both prevention and Ryan White Part B care services?
Well, I think that's something we have to figure out, is what is our message? How broad do we want to get? And I guess how daring we want to be. And I want to recognize that there are people on the council who might not feel comfortable with saying certain things, and recognize too that there are agencies represented on the council who stand to potentially receive state funding in the future. I mean, the state is saying that they will be providing funding to make up for this. And, there may be organizations that don't want to put themselves in hot water if they have a chance of getting some funding in the future. And, I can respect that. So, that's all to say, this is a very tricky thing to figure out, because we all come from very different sorts of organizations. I know that I personally can't sign anything as a member, as a representative of the AETC. I can sign as a co-chair for EHE or as a private citizen, but I can't as, a federal grantee sign. So I think if anyone has thoughts about the best way to do this, whether doing some work sort of over email, drafting something, and Dr. Hildreth?
Claire, I just want to make one comment, if I might. The governor and his health minister, director, commissioner have promised to replace the money that's going to be refused from CDC. So I would strongly encourage every leader of organizations that's going to lose the funding to write a letter to the commissioner requesting replacement of those funds, explaining what's going to be lost without those funds. Letter doesn't have to be a complaining letter, doesn't have to be attacking or commenting on why they did what they did. But since they've committed to replace the funds, I strongly suggest, and we're going to do this at Meharry, to write a letter to the commissioner saying, here's what we need, here's what we're doing, and the loss of the CDC funds amount to such and such, and we request that you replace them. So let's call their bluff, right? If every organization that's going to lose funds would write a letter to the commissioner saying, thank you so much for your commitment to keeping us in business. Here's what we need. right? So that's what I would encourage us to do. I think the letters are fine, op-eds are fine, but let's write letters to the commissioner saying, thank you for your commitment to us. Here's what we need. And let's call their bluff, right? I'm also going to have a meeting with the governor to personally express to him in a diplomatic way what a cowardly decision this is. Okay. Just between us, it's all about Planned Parenthood. That's what this all comes down to. There are other ways to achieve the same goal, and this is not the right way to do it. So for what it's worth, that's what I would advise us to do as individual organizations to make our needs known to our new commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a really great idea. And I'm not exactly sure which organizations on this call are directly impacted by the cuts. I mean, I know Streetworks and Nashville Cares, but I'm not sure about others. And I can reach out to both of them after this call. So Dwayne put a question in the chat about whether the money that they're committing to replace will be obtainable with the new priority groups. I think that's a great question. I certainly don't have the answer. If anyone else has thoughts, please. And for those who may not know, Dr. Hildreth, so those priority groups, I believe, were first responders, mothers and children, and victims of sex trafficking. Dr. Hildreth, I think I saw your hand first.
First of all, are we in 1993 or 2023? How many times have there been a mother-to-child transmission of HIV in the last 2 decades? Okay, I mean, I'm sorry. That's all the more reason to have organizations that do this work write a letter to the commissioner to understand that the priorities that they've established are not what they need to be. I mean, this is foolishness. So anyway, that's all the more reason, Claire, to have the commissioner understand. Maybe he doesn't understand, certainly our governor doesn't. I'm going to help him out with that. That these priority groups that they've established are not really what's really needed here. We know how to stop HIV. It's by identifying those who are infected, getting them on treatment, suppressing their virus, and we can make this thing go away. We're not going to do it by focusing on pregnant mothers or first responders. This is total nonsense, right? I apologize, but can we just enlighten them a bit? That would be very helpful. And I'll shut up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. I don't think you need to apologize. I think everyone here's on the same page about that. And Mark, I'll let you comment in just a sec, but I'm, it's not funny, but I sort of made a joke the other day that all the organizations should just go and update their mission statement and add lines about first responders, mothers and children. I mean, like, obviously that's not a real solution, but it's just so silly. All right, Mark, what did you want to share?
Well, you all have covered it a little bit, and just to take the old time, take you down the memory lane for the old timers in here. We know this territory. We wasted so much time and energy talking in code and writing grants in code, and I've heard indirectly, very indirectly, so don't quote me, that people at the state are already preparing to do the kind of thing you're describing. So how do we sort of take this money saying, yes, we're going to address those priorities and then use it the way it should be used? There was a whole period of time when you couldn't use keywords, red flag words in grants for MSM. So people spent all this energy writing grants around the language so they could do what they knew they needed to do. And so, as Dr. Hildreth said, it's turning back the clock. And maybe we need to steel ourselves to be prepared to do that, but it's so counterproductive. And so that's just my 2 cents. Thanks for letting me step in.
Did someone else have a hand up at some point? I thought I saw one, but maybe. Another thing, I've been kicking around with some of the people I've been talking with is whether there's a role for national advocacy. I don't know if that's a path that leads anywhere very productive, but if anyone has strong connections in the legislature or I don't know, it's something else to consider, a different avenue at least. Dr. Honka, I think I saw your hand first.
I think that, I mean, I think definitely there's a role, and I think Mark posted that it's ongoing. We've been talking to HIV MA and IDSA. There's been a lot in the press from many other organizations, but specifically, as ID physicians and HIV providers at Vanderbilt. We have a meeting with them next week, but they've started their own advocacy, but I think if there's if they will ask us in that meeting if there are specific asks. So if there's something specific I can bring to that call.
Dwayne, did you want to add something?
Yeah, sure. So let me reintroduce myself because I have many capacities. So I actually was the last person to hold the position with Planned Parenthood with the condom distribution program across the state. So I was laid off last February, and that's how I end up now being with the National Harm Reduction Coalition. So I'm the current state policy coordinator with them. But what I wanted to add to your conversation was that there are a lot of outside entities that are, willing to support. I'm sure you all already hear about them, like AIDS United and other people who are ready to kind of jump into action and help with whatever that needs to be, I guess, worked up. I think a lot of people are really kind of trying to see if the governor is going to do what he's promising he's going to do. And then be like, okay, well, we'll just supplement whatever he's gonna do. But I know specifically in Shelby County, like we we are kind of like, okay, what are we gonna do with our hands? And so when it comes to like this whole situation, what we're trying to do is really just try to be like, okay, everyone come together and let's start having town halls and kind of doing some thought sharing. From my understanding, I know the Southern AIDS Coalition is planning on doing this across the state of Tennessee. So if you guys are familiar with Will Ramirez, you might want to reach out to them and go ahead and kind of link up with them. I know that they're going to do that, as well as possibly we've already talked about exploring the 2 grants that they're rejecting the money from. I think somewhere I'm hearing through backroom conversations that people at the CDC are trying to figure out if maybe agencies can still obtain that money and then just kind of funnel it through. So instead of it being a TDH get the money, it would go to a United Way, and then they would just contract with whoever that gets it. So there are avenues that I'm hearing in the ether, like solutions, but nothing solid. But I just wanted to add that.
And Mark, did you have something?
I was just going to say, I'm aware that's some of the work that the national organizations are doing. And one of the hangups is until it's on the record, until the CDC is notified, they can't proceed with things that they have expressed willingness to proceed with. So this is part of the political game, I would guess, And there is some back channel work going on with the assembly or the state legislature to push that. I am aware of that also. So there are a lot of parts to this, and everybody's bringing their own thing. I think one thing that Dwayne really said that matters to me is this has been a motivator for lots of people who maybe weren't intimately collaborating or pulling things together to come together, and that may be the best thing that comes out of that, or out of this situation, getting people back at the table and prioritizing getting things done like this.
I have two questions for anyone who wants to answer. The first is anyone concerned about what other federal grants might be in jeopardy? And I'm specifically thinking about Ryan White Part B. I'm wondering if that's in danger. And then also I'm wondering if there might be an opportunity for us to push for expansion of EHE to the entire state of Tennessee. I don't know how much that would make up for the losses, but I don't know. Anyone have thoughts on either of those things? Mark, is your hand up or is it still up from before?
Claire, this is Amber. I'm not sure that pushing to get EHE expanded to the whole state would make a difference, because that would still be like, say they designated the whole state to be a phase 1 jurisdiction, like the way Memphis is. That's still a federal grant. That's still PS 2010, which all of those grants across the U.S. are funneled through county and state governments. And now if it was a statewide, it would go to the state government. So that would just we'd be in the same boat. So I don't know that would help unless CDC does find a workaround to find another person to funnel, or another agency to funnel, like to basically bypass the state health department. But that's never been done before on this scale. They do fund organizations directly, but not to this scale.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. I didn't realize that they were being funneled through state health departments. Beverly, did you have something?
No, I think Amber answered. Just to take it a little further, I was just gonna mention that, the EHE dollars are just a little different. I mean, I know that they come through the state health department, but if I'm correct on the prevention side, but when you said Ryan White Part B, I was thinking about the the care side, and I was going to say that's not that's a different grant and a different way they receive those monies differently.
All right. Well, I know that we are kind of at our time here, and I don't want to. I know you're all busy people, so I don't want to take us over time. I don't think we are able to vote on our minutes from last time, so maybe we can just defer the minutes from last time and this time for our next meeting. But in the meantime, I think maybe once we get that information from Dr. Haas about the survey results, then maybe me and Dr. Bullock and Morgan can put our heads together and start working on some kind of statement. But as Dr. Hilder said, I do also think it's really important for everyone who is in a position to also reach out individually, and the more voices that we have pushing on this issue, the better. So just encourage all of you, if you're in a position where you can do that, please do. And I think, Dr. Bullock, did you want to close us out here?
Yeah, will do, Claire. And just another thought around the letter, I guess, if anybody has any thoughts around timelines would be potentially helpful as well. I don't want to extend everything out for a really long time, but also, don't want to do anything too soon if we don't need to. But that's just a thought around that. Obviously can't approve the minutes. So if there are any questions, concerns, or announcements that anybody has to share for anything upcoming, I know we had a lot of things in the chat throughout the meeting of things upcoming, but any additional comments around any announcements from anybody on the panel today? No. And Morgan, I'm not really sure how, there's a lot of good information in the chat. I'm not really sure how people go back and pull this after the meeting. If you can provide some clarity around that, because I've never been able to pull the chat after the meeting. Do you know?
Also uncertain, but try to copy and paste it before.
No, there's a lot of good information, and I just hate that when the meeting's over, it kind of disappears, and can't click on these throughout the meeting. So there's a lot of good stuff for a lot of people here. Anyway, so we'll move on and close out the meeting. So thanks to everybody for attending today. Our next meeting is April 6th, same time, same place. Lots of good conversation. If anybody has anything in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to us. We communicate pretty frequently in between these meetings. So if there's any information that needs to be shared or, kind of spread out to the panel in general, we can do that. So thank you, everybody. Dwayne, if you're still on, thank you so much for joining us today as well. And everybody have a great rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everyone. Good to see you, Mark.
Thank you.